Hello everyone, and welcome to my conference presentation number 1. My name is Tracie Chavis. In this presentation, we will dive into the complicated conversation on the curriculum scholar, Dr. Bettina Love. You might be asking yourself, who is Dr. Bettina Love, and what are her contributions to the field of curriculum? And what exactly is an abolitionist educator? Before we dive deeper into Dr. Love's educational journey, let me give you a brief snapshot of who Dr. Love is. Like most women, Dr. Love wears many hats. First and foremost, she is a wife and a mother. Dr. Bettina Love is currently a professor at the William F. Russell Teacher College at Columbia University. She has previously taught at the University of Georgia as the Athletic Association Endowed Professor. She is most widely known for her work as the co-founder of the Abolitionist Teaching Network. Besides being an educator, Dr. Love is a best-selling author and a highly sought-after motivational speaker. She speaks on a wide range of topics such as abolitionist teaching, education reform, anti-racism, black girlhood, queer youth, hip-hop education, and much more. In this 5-part series, we will explore Dr. Bettina Love's life and career history, what scholars she is referencing within her work, recurring topics, themes, and theories in Dr. Love's body of work, the significance of her research to curriculum and instruction, and last but not least, Dr. Love's impact on me as an educator. Bettina Love grew up in Rochester, New York. Dr. Love openly admits she did not grow up wanting to be an educator. She set her sights on playing basketball and possibly coaching basketball one day. She played basketball through high school and college. It was in college she realized she was not as good at playing basketball as she thought she was. From there, she set her sights on the field of education. She earned her Bachelor's of Science degree in Liberal Studies and her Master's in Education at the University of Pittsburgh. She later received her PhD in Educational Policy Studies from Georgia State University. Dr. Bettina Love has over 15 years' experience in the educational field. The majority of her teaching career has been at the collegiate level. She was an assistant professor at Northern Kentucky University from 2009 to 2011. She then became an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Theory and Practice at the University of Georgia from 2011 to 2015. She advanced her career at UGA by becoming a professor at the exact same department she was an assistant professor. She worked as a professor at the University of Georgia from 2015 to 2022. Currently, she is a professor at the William Russell Teacher College at Columbia University. When asked why she wanted to become a teacher, Dr. Bettina Love said, "When I started to learn more about education and the issues impacting minority kids and marginalized kids in education, that's when I said that I want to become a teacher." Another huge aspect of Dr. Love's career is being a best-selling author and public speaker. Dr. Love has written and co-authored 3 best-selling books. They are We Want to Do More Than Survive, Abolitionist Teaching in the Pursuit of Educational Reform, Punished for Dreaming, How School Reform Harms Black Children and How We Heal, and Hip Hop Little Sisters Speak, Negotiating Hip-Hop Identities and Politics in the South. In total, she has sold over 150,000 books. To date, Dr. Love has spoken in over 550 speaking engagements on various topics affecting Black and brown children. Being that Dr. Bettina Love is an advocate for all, with a strong focus on the most marginalized individuals and children in our country, Dr. Love references and quotes a wide variety of individuals such as curriculum scholars, civil rights activists, educational theorists, psychoanalysts, and more. Some prominent figures she quotes throughout her body of work are W.E.D. Du Bois, Gloria Lattin-Billings, Samara Kwachi, Ruth Brown, Robin D.G. Kelly, and Deborah Britzman, just to name a few. Dr. Bettina Love references E.B. Du Bois throughout many pieces of her work. William Edward Beauregard Du Bois was one of the foremost Black intellects of his era. In the early 1900s, E.B. Du Bois fought against racism and historical systems of oppression in the United States. He spent much of his adult life protesting against lynching, Jim Crow laws, and discrimination not only in the field of employment, but also in education. In Dr. Love's article, We Cannot Just Research Racism, Abolitionist Teaching and Educational Justice, she makes a direct connection to something E.B. Du Bois said in 1926. He said, "What do we want? What is this thing we are after? We want to be Americans, full-fledged Americans, with all the rights of other Americans, but is that all? Do we simply want to be Americans? Once in a while, through all of us, there's some flashes of clairvoyance, some clear idea of what America really is. We who are dark can see America in a way that white Americans cannot. In seeing our country, thus, are we satisfied with its present goal and ideals. Dr. Love points out how ironic it is in 1926, E.B. Du Bois is asking himself the same question we as a society should be asking ourselves. We are still fighting for the same thing E.B. Du Bois was fighting for a century ago. Over 100 years later, these systems of oppression are still rooted in our educational system. This oppression is part of Dr. Love's call for abolitionist teaching. One of the main curriculum scholars Dr. Bettina Love references is Gloria Ladson-Billings. Dr. Ladson-Billings coined the term culturally relevant pedagogy, or CRP. According to the California Department of Education, culturally relevant pedagogy is a theoretical model that focuses on multiple aspects of a student's achievement and supports students to uphold their cultural identities. Culturally relevant pedagogy also calls for students to develop critical perspectives that change societal inequalities. In Dr. Ladson-Billings' article, she explains that culturally relevant pedagogy focuses on advancing student learning, developing cultural competence, and fostering critical consciousness. Dr. Love references Dr. Ladson-Billings' research in CRP throughout her body of work. In her article, A Radical Doctrine, Abolitionist Education in Hard Times, Dr. Love talks about how, in culturally relevant teaching, we have to bring radical joy, radical trust, radical imagination, and radical disruption. When speaking of radical trust, Dr. Ladson-Billings stated, "The inherent distrust in education is amplified through social injustices and inequities established by racial policies, such as inadequate funding and reinscribing racial segregation." Both Love and Ladson-Billings stress the importance on focusing on our most marginalized students. These students need to be able to uphold their cultural identities in the classroom and be able to trust the educators they are working with to foster an equal and fair education. Robert D.G. Kelly is one of the scholars and historians Dr. Love references when it pertains to abolitionist teaching. In his work, What Abolition Looks Like, From Panthers to the People, Abolition for the People, Robert D.G. Kelly states, "Abolition works to dismantle the systems that have caused harm. Education is a system that is causing harm. So let's not reimagine or reform education. Let's tear it down and build something more just, loving, and kind that centers Black life. To do this, we must have a bold imagination to dream something different and dream something that is about equality and love. The idea of abolitionist teaching is not just for the most marginalized children. All children can benefit from this system of education rooting in equality and joy. However, abolitionist teaching does break down the systems of oppression for Black and brown children. They can finally receive an equal and fair education. Many abolitionists say, we are not just trying to tear down bad schools, we're trying to tear down the conditions that have created those schools." Throughout her body of work, Dr. Bettina Love has several recurring themes and topics. Some of these reoccurring themes build upon each other, such as reform is not enough, abolish what doesn't work with our education system, call for co-conspirators, and solutions for change. Another reoccurring theme that builds upon each other in Dr. Love's work is the spirit murdering of Black children. In Black girlhood, look at how we teach Black girls. What exactly is abolitionist teaching? In her own words, Dr. Love explains, abolitionist teaching refers to restoring humanity for children in schools. She states, "We cannot try to reform this world. We have to think very deeply about how we start over. I argue that we can start over with love, joy, compassion, and a radical imagination. A new world is possible." The idea of abolitionist teaching is not just for our most marginalized children. All children can benefit from this system of education rooted in equality and joy. However, abolitionist teaching does break down the systems of oppression for Black children so that they can finally receive an equal and fair education. Many abolitionists say, we're not just going to tear down bad schools, we're trying to tear down the conditions that created those schools. One of Dr. Bettina Love's recurring themes is reform is not enough. By saying this, Dr. Love means in education reform, the changes already in place are not enough to have equity for all students. In her article, What Do We Have to Lose? Disruption, Agitation, and Abolition in Black Education, Dr. Love explains, the field of education is not lacking in scholarship and literature that scientifically demonstrates the humanity of children of color, but their suffering continues because their humanity is questioned and denied by the very people and policies charged with educating and protecting them. So what do we have to lose by starting over, abolishing what we have, and creating a new system built on love, joy, healing, and intersectional social justice? Predominantly Black and brown students are traditionally the most marginalized within our educational system. Dr. Love wants to abolish the system of oppression that our country is rooted in. In her article, An Essay for Teachers Who Understand Racism is Real Love, explains, but reform is no longer enough. Too often, reform is rooted in whiteness because it appeases white liberals who need to see change but want to maintain their status, power, and supremacy. She wants to abolish policies in our educational systems like high-stake testing, police presence in schools, publisher-created curriculum, expulsion and suspensions, and so much more. Dr. Love wants to replace it with community-created curriculum, hiring counselors and therapists, increasing the number of minority teachers in schools, implementing restorative justice, just to name a few solutions. Another one of Dr. Love's reoccurring themes is the spirit murdering of Black children within the walls of classrooms around our nation. In her article, We Cannot Just Research Racism, Abolitionist Teaching and Educational Justice, Dr. Love states, and I argue that if you are going to teach us, then you have to know our lives matter. If you are going to teach us, then you have to know who we are. You have to know our beauty. If you are going to teach us when we walk in those doors, you have to say, oh, what a beautiful people. Dr. Love has been open about the fact that many of her white teachers did not see her. Her experience in school were what many Black girls feel in school. This sparked Dr. Love's focus about how Black children are educated and treated within school. In her article, Anti-Black State Violence, Classroom Edition, The Spirit Murdering of Black Children, she stated, spirit murdering within a school context is the denial of inclusion, protection, safety, nutrients, and acceptance because of a fixed, yet fluid, moldable structures of racism. Love goes on to explain, Black boys and girls are expelled and suspended at much higher rates than their white counterparts for the same or lesser offensive infractions. Black children are dehumanized and criminalized from the moment they enter the school doors. When discussing the high rates of expulsions and suspensions as it pertains to Black girls in her article, Dr. Love shares a report from the African American Policy Forum, AAPF, from 2014 titled, Black Girls Mattered, Pushed Out, Over-Policed, and Underprotected. This report stated that the rates of expulsion were dramatically disproportionate between Black and white students, especially among girls. Findings showed in New York the number of disciplinary cases involving Black girls was more than 10 times more than those involving their white counterparts. One of the main focuses Dr. Love has when it pertains to the spirit murdering of Black children is Black girls specifically. Due to the fact Black girls are stereotyped in schools, treated poorly, and oftentimes given harsher punishments than their peers, Dr. Love calls to action a focus on Black girl joy. In her article she co-founded with Darius Dunn, Anti-Racist Language Arts Pedagogy is Incomplete Without Black Joy, Dr. Love states, Black joy is the radical imagination of collective memories of resistance, trauma, survival, love, and cultural modes of expression, which push and expand anti-racist pedagogies. Dr. Love has been very vocal about the fact the field of curriculum needs to evolve. She has called to action both Black and white teachers for change. When she speaks about educational reform, she stresses the fact that educational reform is not enough. Minor changes to education are not going to eliminate the systems of oppression deeply rooted in our educational system. She calls for white teachers to become co-conspirators in the fight. When explaining co-conspirators in her book, We Want to Do More Than Survive, Abolitionist Teaching, and the Pursuit of Educational Reform, Dr. Love explains that co-conspirators are choosing to engage in the struggle for educational justice, knowing that you have the ability and human right to refuse oppression and refuse to oppress others, mainly your students. Once teachers rally around this idea of abolitionist teaching, the real work happens. Dr. Love calls for teachers to reimagine and rewrite curriculum, demand restorative justice, call out teachers who degrade minority children, and more. In her article, To Confront Inequality, You Must First Understand It, Dr. Love provides solutions to educators, administrators, policymakers, and politicians throughout her research by sharing a variety of strategies to implement to help teachers better teach minority children. She states, teachers need more professional development for understanding inequality in order to confront it. Too often we think the work of fighting oppression is just intellectual. The real work is personal, emotional, spiritual, and communal. Even though professional development is a great start to confront racism within our schools, Dr. Love stressed the fact one or two professional development will not end racism in our schools. She explains, it happens through a process of self-discovery, healing, and learning to reject and call out racist ideas, people, and structures. Anti-racist teaching is not a teaching approach or method, it is a way of life. In the article, Dr. Love co-wrote with Dr. Goli Muhammad, Critical Community Conversations, Cultivating the Elusive Dialogue about Racism with Parents, Community Members, and Teachers. Dr. Love discusses the idea of community organizing. She explains these types of conversations and organizings are not new to the Black communities. They coined the term critical community conversations. They explained, the aim of CCC is to start a dialogue within the school community, an effort to learn from one another and build solidarity. For these conversations to be productive for everyone, we stress that listening, reflecting, and creating a safe, sharing environment is crucial to the progress of the community building and for a better and just tomorrow. There are 3 steps to successful and goal-oriented CCC. They are, the conversation must be historic, the conversation must be intersectional, the conversation must disrupt colonized thinking. Ultimately, the goal of CCC is to move from critical conversation to critical action. Love stresses the importance of bringing our students' cultures into our classrooms. For many minority children, hip-hop music is a massive part of their culture. In her article, Urban Storytelling, How Storyboarding, Movie Making, and Hip-Hop-Based Education Can Promote Students' Critical Voice, Dr. Love said, I believe it's important to explore hip-hop as a curricular and academic resource because hip-hop, regardless of a student's race, class, gender, or religious, represents the ways in which urban youth speak, think, create, move, and relate to our world. Dr. Love explains there are 5 key elements of hip-hop to bring into the classroom. These elements are rapping, breakdancing, graffiti, DJing, and the knowledge of self and community. Dr. Love goes on to explain the importance of educators enabling students to critique society, while still accepting students' culture, literacy practices, and the circumstances they encounter as urban youth. How does this research impact me as an educator? As someone who just completed her 18th year in education, Dr. Bettina Love's work is highly relevant to my teaching and the demographic of children I teach at Button Gwinnett Elementary School in Liberty County, Georgia. I've taught at the same Title I school my entire teaching career. According to U.S. News, the minority enrollment at Button Gwinnett Elementary School is 81.3%. Out of the 81.3%, our percentage of African American children or biracial children is 69.6%. Dr. Love's concept of abolitionist teaching focuses on minorities. As a teacher who teaches a high number of minority children and a mother of 2 biracial children, I want to ensure I'm providing my students and my own children with the best education, with a firm understanding they are loved and accepted. Dr. Love calls for white teachers to join her in her fight as co-conspirators, not allies. Being a co-conspirator is the kind of educator I want to be every day. I want to ensure my students in my classroom and all students in my school receive an equal education, feel safe and protected at school, and feel like we see them for all aspects of who they are, and overall love and enjoy school. I would like to leave you with a powerful quote from Dr. Bettina Love. She said, "To love all children, we must struggle together to create schools we are taught to believe are impossible. Schools built on justice, love, joy, and anti-racism.